today's episode of Future Says, we have Leslie Shannon, the head of innovation and trend scouting at Nokia, as well as the author of two recent books, Virtual Natives and Interconnected Realities. Leslie, thanks so much for joining the show.
My absolute pleasure.
So Leslie, tell us a bit more about all of those different roles, all of those different books.
My role at Nokia, I've been with Nokia for 23 years, and my role for the last almost 10 years now has been to be the head of trend scouting, effectively. I'm located in Silicon Valley, and the genesis of it really was I had been at Nokia headquarters in Finland, and Nokia is such a dominant presence in Finland that everything is telecommunications there, and telecommunications is super sexy. I get out to California and I find that the rest of the world kind of thinks that telecommunications are not so sexy. It's like, what? And that there's other stuff that is really sexy. And I realized, well, my God, there's a whole world out here of things that require our business because we do connectivity, right? We make the hardware and the software and we sell it to phone companies to build their networks with. We don't do phones anymore. Hot flash. We sold that business to Microsoft a decade ago, so don't ask me to fix your phone. But I was realizing that, okay, hang on. If there's all of these advances in robotics and drones and everything that require connectivity, and yet our industry is not looking at that as we're building networks, we're going to have a mismatch and it's going to be bad. So I appointed myself to go out there and look at what was happening and start telling my industry about it. And that's how I became a trend scout.
Amazing. So what is happening?
Yeah, well, actually, you also asked about the book, so I'm going to take this hot moment to. So, Interconnected Realities is about the metaverse and the reality of the metaverse, coming from the point of view of the networks that are going to need to support this kind of idea. So I talk about what it is, what's actually happening, because there's a lot already happening. Even though Metaverse got knocked out of the headlines by generative AI, it's still there, it's still coming up, and I'm really excited about where that's all going. That's a whole separate topic. And then Virtual Natives, I wrote that with Catherine Henry, and that one's really about how generations Z and Alpha, which is kind of people born since 2000, how they use digital media and how they use digital tools and how different it is from the previous generations, and how basically they're going to disrupt everything as soon as they become adults and see all of these systems that have been built that are kind of like not so optimized and could be improved with the advances that are here now. They know how those tools work. They're going to be disrupting everything from the bottom up when they get fed up with things like clunkiness in the way that mortgages work or health insurance works or, all these things. I think we're going to have a massive youth-led wave of AI-generated disruption hitting us over the next decade.
And I think we've got a lot to discuss then.
Yeah. And that's just the intro.
That's just the intro. Okay, we've so much to discuss. So let's take it piece by piece then. First thing you mentioned there before we went into generative AI and Gen Z is the metaverse. So you said it has gone out of the headlines a little bit, but what excites you about that technology trend?
For me, the metaverse is, and we got a little bit sidetracked into kind of thinking that the metaverse is entirely a fully immersive digital world where I'm an avatar and you're an avatar and it's all digital. And that's part of what the metaverse is. But for me, the metaverse is truly the union of the digital and the physical. Because if you're in a fully immersive digital world, that's great, but you're not going to live there. At some point, you have to leave that generated world, that digital world, and go make dinner, or feed the dog, and people who maybe have a lot of servants or something maybe don't have those goals or those needs, but the rest of us do. And so being present in the physical world with the people that we love and having the sunshine on our face, that's actually more important than like wearing a headset all the time. Yeah. And so the tools that can actually bring digital information and entertainment into our reality in the physical space, that's actually, for me, the true metaverse. And that exists today on the enterprise side, but the headsets and the gear to do that, it's a little bit clunky. It'll help you do your job in an enterprise setting, because then you'll take off the headset at the end of the hour or whatever. But for the consumer side, we're still waiting for that hardware. And the kind of hardware that I'm talking about is eyeglass form factor glasses that will be able to read your surroundings and then create digital things, whether it's information or entertainment, that integrates in a non-obtrusive, non-obstructive way with your reality, just making everything just a little bit better and richer. That for me is truly the metaverse. And so these glasses, companies like HTC have said like their first iteration for that, we can expect kind of 2027, which may mean 2028, 2029, right? So end of this decade, really.
This kind of goes into what you were saying then, the Gen Z and the next generation and how they're going to use technology. How, in 10 years' time, is somebody going to be living? What technology are they going to be using on a daily basis? How is it going to be radically different to how we live today?
Well, given the I'm always looking at what all the different things that are out there, and then I think of them as kind of, it's a table, and here's all the building blocks on the table. The building blocks that are on the table right now are pointing towards that kind of glasses where you've got, digital overlays on your physical world. And that can enable, everything from like something as simple as if your oven is preheating, right, and you're across the room from it, just glancing over and being able to see, like, what's the temperature of your oven in, like, a really big digital readout, so that you don't have to go over and squint at the oven dial later or whatever. Stuff, really simple stuff like that, where you're more engaged with the things around you in your environment. But also more imaginative things like entertainment, being able to play games. I have to say, the Quest 3, the VR headset that's out right now from Meta, is so good. The mixed reality experiences in that are just magnificent. And they really start showing what it is to have digital overlays integrated with your physical space. It's just, we have not even begun the possibilities of what's gonna happen in this. So I think this kind of, because here's the thing. Right now, we have so much information that's available to us through smartphones. But there's a problem with that, because if you're looking at your phone, your gaze is dead-ending in a two-dimensional screen, and you have de facto removed yourself from your physical environment. And so if I'm looking at my phone, I'm not looking at you. I'm not here anymore. I'm deep into whatever it is that I'm looking at on my phone. So the screen gaze problem, that's actually a true issue. It's a social issue. It's a safety issue. So taking that screen away and having our gaze dead end on people and places, that's actually the shift that really needs to happen. And that's what I'm looking for. And for me, that's the human need that really powers the metaverse. That's the problem that the metaverse is solving. Because technology, it's pointless unless it's actually solving a worthwhile problem. So being able to, first of all, not be looking at a screen anymore, but looking at my surroundings. And the other thing that we don't really think about it too much, but when you're with a phone, you've lost a hand, right? So so I only have one hand now. So being able to get that same kind of information and entertainment integrated with my physical world as I'm moving through it, and having both hands free at the same time, sign me up. This cannot happen fast enough. So I think a lot of the things that we're doing on smartphones today will shift to this integrated, context-aware kind of thing, leaving us with our hands free. And so things like, again, Meta's putting generative AI into their Ray-Ban glasses, that's an early move here, and I've got my eye on that one.
Yeah. I'm thinking 2024. Let's get a pair of them.
Yeah. However, somebody asked me recently, and I just had described this vision and everything, and they asked me, what could change from what you're imagining now? Everything that I just described. That's only me looking at the building blocks that are currently on the table and putting them together and spinning them forward.
Sure.
As soon as some kind of black swan happens, and guess what? This is an industry where that kind of thing happens all the time. Then maybe it's not glasses. Maybe it's an earpiece. Maybe it's a hat. Maybe it's I don't know what. The form factor could be different. The way that it integrates, it could be like something embedded in your skin. I mean, anything is possible. So the caveat is what I'm talking about is only based on what I see today. Because I know what I'm talking about sounds really science fiction-y, but it's absolutely based on the capabilities that I see out there in my trend scouting right now.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier that there is a difference between the metaverse in your personal life and then within the industry, within the enterprise. In my world, I see a lot of companies talking about digital twins within engineering.
Yes.
Are you talking about the same thing?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the The wonderful thing about enterprise is that the metaverse for enterprise is already here. The only thing that we're missing on the consumer side is the hardware, that end user hardware that's a very light form factor. With enterprise, as I said before, that's not really an issue. That hardware is already here. So enterprises are going full steam ahead with metaverse kinds of things, with using digital twin solutions to imagine factories before they're built, or rather to construct factories digitally before they're built. BMW has started doing this. And then to optimize everything within it in a digital way, and then instead of kind of just like looking at a blueprint and going, that looks okay, having people put on headsets and walk through the digital thing to find out, oh, that door is really inconveniently placed. Yep. And to fix all of that in the digital model before you actually build the physical one, saving, lots and lots of time and getting lots of efficiency. So there's that whole digital twin world. But then there's also remote collaboration, and being able to do things like work with digital versions of new prototypes with people who are both with you physically and somewhere else, and and again, having not physical prototypes but digital ones that are much easier to alter and to keep iterating, speeding up everything at greatly reduced cost. We at Nokia did a survey last year of companies that were already using, we looked at companies in a bunch of the industrial spaces where metaverse is already being used. And we asked companies who were thinking about using metaverse technologies, whether VR or AR or digital twins or using for training, just, all of it. What do you think the business gains are going to be? And then they said, oh, well, we think we'll save a little bit here on sustainability because people won't have to travel. We'll save a little bit here on customer experience. We'll save a little bit here on efficiency. And then we asked companies who have already implemented these solutions. We said, what business gains have you actually realized? And what they came back was, yes, all of these things that they were imagining beforehand, what they were finding was that the business gains were even greater than they had imagined they were going to be. I've been working in new technologies my entire career. This is the first time I have ever seen that happen. Usually what happens is, here's the new thing, it's really fabulous, and then you try it, you're like, oh,
yeah.
I was really expecting something a little better than this, but oh well, it'll grow, it'll get better over time. This one is hot right out of the box. Cool. And in fact, Deloitte also did a survey asking companies that were already using Metaverse, how many implementations, how many use cases do you actually have? The average was 6. So it's not just like the training guys having some VR headsets. What's happening is some bold, brave individual, and because this is still pretty new technology, yep, implementation does tend to be led by one bold, brave individual who has enough power and has enough budget to say, we're going to do this. And then they do it, and then the results are so good that everyone else goes, oh, I want something like that for my department too. And then next thing you know, you've got 6 use cases or 8 or 10. And because this is really, really good technology.
Amazing. Talking about some of that really, really good technology, new technology, bold technology. You mentioned it earlier, generative AI.
Yes.
So you mentioned the caveat that everything's based on what we have today, and we certainly have Gen AI today. You talked recently about the AI inflection point.
Yes.
Which I'm very interested in.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about your excitement around Gen AI and why we're at an inflection point.
Yeah, I actually had a really interesting conversation just a couple of days ago with Richard Karras of NVIDIA and Steve Canepa of IBM, and it was a panel, and so we were on stage during this conversation. But Richard and Steve both had some really good insights, and a lot of it had to do with the quality of the data, and it's Richard said, look, it used to be garbage in, garbage out for all kinds of other things for computing, but that really matters for AI. You need to not have garbage data in there, because if you do, you're going to get garbage AI out, and that's so true.
Dangerous also.
And dangerous, exactly. And so you've got to have data that you can trust, because trust is the key. And actually, Steve said, look, 2024 is the year, in terms of generative AI, of both data and trust. So cleaning up the data, making sure, and particularly for corporates, if you are actually implementing some kind of generative AI thing within your corporate walls, don't be lazy about the data choices that for what you feed into there. I was actually talking on another panel recently, and I said, well, with corporate data, you're fine because it's your data and it should be clean. And like 3 other people in the panel started laughing their heads off. like, do you know how much bullshit goes into, like, say, for example, sales pipelines? And I was like, oh, good point. I had been thinking of sensor data, right? Because that's clear, that's straightforward. But it's like, yeah.
Good point.
So you need to be careful about what data you're feeding into. Not to say don't trust your salespeople, but
Were you saying that?
No. It's not a headline. Not a headline. But yeah, be really, really vigilant about the data that goes in. And this is not a kitchen sink moment. This is a carefully curated moment. And then once you actually have your data that you're actually running your generative AI on, then you will have trust. And it is only then that you can actually, really get the insights and the benefits from generative AI. Because on a corporate level, one of the problems that we have, and this goes across all industries, is that no matter what your company is, you're generating some kind of data, customer data, sensor data, whatever. But the people who know how to query that data and how to get results from it are the data scientists. Great. The data scientists are not the people at the front end of the business. They are not the ones who are interfacing with the customers. They are not the ones who are seeing what the problems are, who are experiencing, like, I don't know, supply chain problems or, whatever. They're not the ones who are seeing the problems. And so the brilliant thing about generative AI in a corporate context is the use of large language models to allow natural language queries to really intricate databases that opens up that data pool to the people who do know the business and who do know the questions to ask. And so that's the transformational thing. But what I was saying about carefully curating your data, anybody who knows, who's worked with data, because I was in IT before I joined Nokia, it's a hellscape out there. And one example, any large corporation has just a spaghetti back end of all kinds of stuff, and no 2 systems like interface with each other today. And so one really good example I have of the magnitude of the challenge ahead, which we really shouldn't dismiss, is the city of Wellington in New Zealand, the capital. They're visionary, absolutely visionary people there. They began in 2011 to centralize all of their databases, all the different departments of city council, all the different bureaus and everything, to normalize the data so it could all go into a central database. And then they used that central information and displayed results, so made it available for people, just city council people, to be able to ask normal questions, and then to have the results displayed in a digital twin of the city. And that's another really key thing here, the visualization of data in a way, because you can, again, if you ask your complicated data a question and get back Excel rows, that's not going to be as immediately understandable as what the patterns are than if you get it back in some kind of visual representation that's easy for anyone to understand. And especially anything with spatial qualities, being able to represent it in some kind of a map is fabulous. So one of the things that they did at Wellington, and it took 10 years, by the way, that was my point here. It took 10 years to normalize the databases. And anyone in IT goes, oh, well, yeah. So the cleaning your data and bringing your data into generative AI, that's not going to happen by Tuesday, right? This is a long-term project. But, so get started now. Yeah. But then one of the great things that, one of the fun examples that I love from Wellington is, once they had all that, they were able to ask questions and to get results about things that had been scattered in various databases all around the city that were never unified before. And the people on the face were able to ask questions that had never been asked before. And one of them was, where are people vomiting on the streets in Wellington, right? And so And that was like, it would never occur to me, to ask that question. But then I asked the question, and the data for that had been held before in 3 different databases. The police had some information, street cleaners had some information, and social services had some information. They put it all together, they display it in a map, and suddenly you can see where there's actual lots more vomit in the streets than others. And one of the things that they found was that there was a lot more vomit in the streets in places where there were bars, which is not a surprise, right? But they particularly found these barf incidents clustered around a particular burger chain. I'm not going to say the name. And actually, I tell the story in my book, Interconnected Realities, and I call it Burger Twin for the digital twin, right? It's that Burger Twin is a pseudonym there. Anyway, so they're like, oh my God, there's all this vomit outside of Burger Twin in these 2 locations. Like, oh, what does this mean? So they sent a couple of city council members to sit outside of Burger Twin in the bar area on a Saturday night and to see what was happening. Turns out people were drinking a lot of beer and then going to use the bathroom, but the bathroom would be occupied. So they would come out of the bars looking for a bathroom, and they would see the bright lights of the Burger Twin, and they would go, and a lot of fast food places in New Zealand have automatic doors. So they'd walk up to the Burger Twin, the automatic doors would slide open, and this particular establishment serves onion rings, and the smell would hit the people, particularly, I think, the onion rings. Wow. And they would end up vomiting. They had never been inside the Burger Twin. So Burger Twin was innocent. Yeah. And so what City Council realized was that they needed to revisit the regulations about how many toilets or blues per capita you needed to have if you served alcohol. That was the problem. And so, so this is the long story, but this is the kind of revelation that can come to you, and really getting at the underlying causes of problems that you didn't even maybe realize that were problems. That's what database normalization and visualization in a digital twin, and then having an interface that anyone in the company can interface with. Now, the vomit makes it kind of a funny story, but this is serious.
I can tell you, after 4 years running this podcast, I think, Leslie, you're the first person to come up with an AI use case for vomit.
I may be the first person ever to say the word vomit on your podcast, so a dubious distinction, but I'll take
it. You mentioned some of these bold individuals, and on this podcast a few years ago, we had a gentleman called Richard Benjamins, who's the head of AI at Telefonica. And he was talking about how the term data scientist, I think, evokes an image of somebody that's coding and somebody that's got a computer science background, but actually today that's no longer necessarily the case. And he had said that they need 4 key ingredients, and he called them the 4 C's, which was critical thinking, creative thinking, collaboration, and communication, which I think is great. And like you said, this generative AI, these natural language prompts, opens up this to a whole host of different people.
100%. I would add a 5th C to that. I would add curiosity.
Exactly.
The people who are willing to go, well, what if? Those are the ones that are really rocking in generative AI right now. Yeah.
And I think one thing on your LinkedIn profile you say is you're a novophiliac, right? Which is somebody that's obsessed with the new.
Yeah, or in love with the new.
In love with the new.
Yeah.
So, I think that is the 5 C's, the novophiliac. Tell us about how you have that mentality, how you strive to do this on a daily basis.
Well, it really is just it's such a big world, and I just want to know what's around the next corner. I think it really is purely curiosity that keeps driving me. In Finland, I've spent a lot of time in Finland. My husband's Finnish. There's a lovely tradition of having a summer cottage that you go to, and you go there every year, and you spend the month of July there at the summer cottage, and it's very beautiful.
And go to a sauna, maybe?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. But for me, it's like, why would you go to the same place every summer? It just makes me feel like desperately locked in, and like I start hyperventilating just even at that concept. there's so much out there, and I just want to keep exploring it. And so there's so much in terms of space. I love traveling. I love seeing the world. I've been to 122 countries so far. Yeah, and so I'm not done yet, you know.
Yeah.
But also time, because things change over time, and I guess that's where the new, you know, this, you know, new stuff keeps coming up, and I just want to know about it and be there.
Yeah.
It's funny though, because I'm very efficiency minded, and so I have a very low tolerance for stuff that doesn't work. So I'm not a particularly good early adopter of technology because I have very little patience, but I'm an early adopter of ideas, and then I'm ready to take them up when they work and if they're not going to waste my time. Like, yeah, stuff that wastes my time. No. Yeah.
Early adopter of ideas. We've spoke about Metaverse. We spoke about Gen AI. What have we not spoke about that you're excited about?
Um,
Or maybe.
yeah, those two are really swamping everything right now. Yeah.
Or maybe are there things that others are excited about that you're less excited about? Some misconceptions out there around technology and what's next. I mean, obviously we've had crypto recently, we had NFTs, we had these types of things. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually that's kind of the poster child right now for me of, like, you know, I still think there might be, well, there is something there in terms of blockchain and Web3 very specifically. NFTs I think is really great for rewarding artists long term, but you know, it kind of took a strange turn. It needs to be solving a problem, and one of the without creating too big a problem itself. And because it is a truism, every new technology only takes off if it solves a problem, but then it creates the next wave of problems that need to be solved, right? So but it also can't come at too high a cost, and the cost can be anything from actual money to time or fiddliness, or, you know, the cost has to be low. And for blockchain, you know, so far the cost has still been very high. You know, even just setting up a wallet and understanding how all this stuff works, it's like, ugh. But so there's something there. I'm willing to accept someday there will be utility. So far I haven't seen it because the cost just keeps outweighing the benefits. And the whole speculative nature of all the cryptocurrency. Yeah. Come on, where's the value? Yeah. Where is the value? Other than me wanting to make more money. That's not like a value.
You'd mentioned earlier about, you know, that you're an early adopter of ideas. And I think a lot of companies, and again, to go back to what you said, bold individuals, a lot of companies are looking for these bold individuals now to embrace new technology, embrace Gen AI, embrace the future. How can companies find these types of people? What skill sets do these people have that would be like yourself?
I think I heard somebody else say this recently, asked about, you know, what skill sets are you looking for, and their answer was adaptability. And I there's a huge amount of truth in that, because you know what, the tools that are there today, you know, I love my ChatGPT and Bing. Who knows if I'm using those in a year? The key is not my ability or anyone's ability to know a certain tool. It's to have the mindset. It's to have the continual learning mindset. But on a company level, how you can attract and retain the kinds of people who actually are going to drive that innovation. I also heard this just recently. I can't take credit for this, but it's the difference between exploiting a new technology and exploring a new technology. And so if you're a company and a new technology comes up like generative AI, you can choose to exploit it, which means integrating it into your current business, but retaining your current business model and not really changing anything. And that'll last you a couple of years at most, because it's the companies who explore it and who use the new technology to create new business models, to take their business in a new direction that may threaten or cannibalize their previous direction. Those are the ones who are going to be creating the businesses that are going to be setting the next standard and wiping out the ones who chose only to exploit. So exploit versus explore. I mean, this isn't a new concept, but I thought that was a very neat way to package it. And there's a lot of industries out there right now that are only exploiting. They're lip service, yeah, this looks really great. Here, try a new improved, glass of water with AI. Well, what does the AI do? Well, it's got AI, as opposed to the totally new thing that was built looking at a purpose. Well, anyway, yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And and so, and the thing is that individuals who are into innovation, they can see the difference, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So if you are an exploiting company, you're going to have a harder time keeping those innovative people around than if you're an exploring company.
Sure.
Yeah.
A colleague of mine always talks about the example of this coffee machine that talks about now that they're AI infused, and they say that basically they can predict what coffee you will want each morning. And he always says, I used to call that counting. He's had 10 lattes the last 10 mornings.
Exactly.
I think he's going to have a latte next. So yeah. So adaptability then is a great, I think, piece of advice for people coming through the next generation of innovation and trend scouters. Within your career at Nokia, have you had particular role models or particular pieces of advice maybe that you've thought, wow, that has really stayed with me through, and that's kind of part of my mission here at Nokia?
Yeah, actually, I really, part of the reason that the adaptability comment, again, that I heard from somebody else, really resonated with me is that really, the adaptability, but the willingness of my company to accept my adaptability. I mean, I mentioned before that I came up with the idea of being a trend scout. I was doing a completely different job when I went to Silicon Valley, and I just started doing it myself in addition to my other job. And then I would just say to customers like, hey, now that I've spent, an hour telling you about Nokia's products, would you like to hear 10 minutes of what I'm seeing in Silicon Valley? Like, yeah. And then 6 months later, those customers would say, we'd love for you to come back, but can you just talk about Silicon Valley? And the thing is that my management saw this, and they recognized that, okay, this is something that I'm good at, and the customers are asking for it, and so it became my full-time job. And not all companies are that flexible and that supportive of their innovative employees. I will be honest, it does mean that, sometimes there's a bit of a question mark, like, where do we put Leslie in the org chart? But in general, Nokia has been so supportive and, willing to think outside the box when something new comes up. Now, from my side, of course, I was, providing a business case. This was something customers were asking for. So it wasn't, just my whim and I'm like, hey, Nokia, you should do this now. But that's why I've been with Nokia for 23 years, because they have been really, really supportive. Also, Nokia is an engineering company, and I have a degree in the history of art. So, the fact that they're also willing to listen to diverse voices within the company and not worry about what I studied for university years ago. The exact answer is about 6.3 million. But because even if I were an engineer, what I would have learned at university in the 80s doesn't matter anymore. My company truly sees me for how I think and has rewarded me on that. And there's honestly not that many companies out there, at least in my experience, who work that way.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful job.
Yeah.
So as the head of innovation and trend scouting, the author of Virtual Natives and Interconnected Realities, final question, Leslie, what excites you the most about the next 12 months, 24 months? What are you working on?
Well, I'm trying to figure out where all the things that we've been talking about, particularly XR, mixed reality, and generative AI, and drones and robotics, and all these kinds of things, how are they going to come together? Because it's never one technology. It's the internet. Great, it's there. It is. There's the internet. But the really disruptive stuff, the Ubers, the Airbnbs of the world that really changed significant industries, they came about, yes, the internet, but also the mobile internet and location-based information and payment information and abilities. It took all of those things together to actually create the stew or the amino acid pool that let Uber and Airbnb like crawl out of the swamp. That's a terrible metaphor, but but that's it. So it's we can never think about one, or we should never think about one technology in isolation. We have to always be thinking about them in conjunction with each other and how they interact with each other. That's why my mental picture of the building blocks on the table is, all right, how are we going to build this? So I think that generative AI and XR are going to come together in some really magical ways, and we're going to have computing integrated into our lives in ways that, honestly, if somebody from 2030 were to walk into this room right now, they'd be doing stuff that even I would be going like, what? Yeah, we're at the beginning, and we cannot even imagine what's going to happen next.
What an exciting time. Thank you so much, Leslie, for joining the show. And we hopefully will keep in touch. And in 2030, we'll see what happens in the world.
That's an appointment I'm going to keep. I'll see you then.
Wonderful. Thank you, Leslie. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.